like a well of experience from being in the military and being around all kinds of people from all different walks of life, all kinds of different life experiences. And, you know, in my house, I try to make the answer like, we're honest and we work hard and we do our best. And that's all you can do. Right. And, you know, try to teach the girls that kind of stuff. And so I feel like we do a good job. I think the neighbors are a little shocked sometimes. We'll be out doing the yard work. We do our own yard work, and which is not normal around here. But then they're out there and they're working and they're helping and they're doing stuff. And like, I feel like we're a team. I feel like the family's a team, and it makes me happy.
Welcome back to the AudioLife podcast, where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today I'm joined by a guest who has lived the real-life version of Top Gun. You'll hear the reference a few times. I won't tell you everything that's coming, but I can tell you that it is incredible, and it's like a movie at so many points in our conversation. Our guest today is Tony Roy. I can't wait for you to hear our story ahead.
I was a F-18 pilot and then became an adversary pilot flying F-5s and F-16s for the remaining 12 years of my career, for the last half of my Navy career. And then the last 3 years I spent flying F-18s again as an adversary. After that, I retired and from the military and started flying for Southwest Airlines, and then also fly for a military contractor called Tactical Air Support, again flying the F-5, continuing that to train active duty military in air combat maneuvering.
Wow, that's a great introduction. I have to ask one quick follow-up question. How was the switch from military flying to Southwest to the commercial?
It's definitely different. In the military, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of preparation for every flight, and you're looking at the weather and the mission planning factors and all these things. And so quite a bit of prep goes in. When I'm at Southwest, there's an entire team of people that do that for me. So I show up, I fly the plane, I get out of the plane, I go to the hotel, I do that for a couple of days, and then I go home. And that's it. And so it's, in a way, it's quite nice. In another way, it's just not as exciting as the Navy flying was, but, exciting is not, sometimes you have to hang those things up, I don't want it to be terribly exciting the rest of my life, because exciting also means a little bit dangerous.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so as you know, at AudioLife, we often want to understand your life story. So we're really trying to understand the factors, the people, the experiences, the characteristics that help to form and inform who you are and the story that you have to share with us. And because of that, I often start at the very beginning. So we are going to dig more into your career. We're going to dig more into the exciting parts, the risks, the challenges, the experiences you've had, maybe why at this stage in life, something less, more cushy makes sense. Maybe it's more comfortable at this point.
Yeah.
But before we get to all of that, I'm actually going to start at the very beginning and ask you to tell us where you were born, and is there a story behind your name?
I grew up in Southern California. I was the fifth of six children from my parents. They had moved from the Detroit area and got there in the late 60s. Started a family. So I have four brothers, two sisters. I was actually named after a very close friend of my dad. We always called him Uncle Tony, but he passed away about, 8 to 10 years after I was born, but a close friend of my dad's. And so it named after him. So grew up in Southern California and in Orange, Tustin, Huntington Beach area. By and large, we moved a decent amount when I was a kid, but yeah.
And what led to moving a decent amount? Was it always sort of local, or what
it was always local? It was always.
Yeah.
My dad always had some crazy scheme. He always had something going on, right? So We moved because in a couple of cases, he bought a house as an investment. So we lived there for a couple of years and then moved on, fully knowing when we moved there that it was going to be a short-term thing. But typically we seem to bounce around. I remember counting at one point, I think I lived in 7 or 8 homes when I was a kid, which, has its goods and its bads. I mean, we lived in some amazing places, but, making new friends and going to new schools, by and large, we were close enough towards the end that we didn't really change schools too much, which made things easier in a way, but, still kind of moving around and always getting used to something. So when I got to the military, the moving every 3 years just kind of felt normal. But
of course.
But I also now despise moving. I just absolutely hate the entire process. So if I never move again, I'll be a very happy man.
Got it. You're probably not the only one who feels that way, but you do have a lot of history behind it.
Yeah. Geez, so, I bet you if you include my military moves, I have something like, God, I would guess somewhere close to 20 moves. And I'm just,
wow.
Just tired of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so aside from the moving aspect, what was your childhood like? What was growing up like? You told us a little bit about your siblings, a few school changes, but what was daily life like?
It's funny. I always thought it was just, we just had this crazy house and there's just always crazy stuff going on and just total chaos. And then now I'm a dad of 4 little girls and I'm like, that's just how a big family is. And my family, so add 2 more people to that and the chaos would probably be about the same. So I always thought it was like, this is just insane. Nobody can live like this. But now I live like this again. So I understand my dad a lot better now than I ever have. He passed away in 2011. And I understand him now better, 13 years later than I ever did when he was alive. Right? So, but just chaos, there's always, and everybody has such different personalities. My brother Denny always wanted to be a police officer and a sheriff. And, my sister Angela was very intellectual, very smart, business student. Richard wanted nothing to do with schooling, but he's a genius in his own way and went forward this totally unique path. My brother John, very good at his job and, went into business and has done extraordinarily well for himself too. And then they were all kind of going this way. And I at least initially noticed that, they were making a lot of money, but the one thing I noticed personally was that none of them really seemed fulfilled, I guess. And I think they've gotten to that point now. But especially back when I was making career decisions, I was like, man, I don't feel like doing that. I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to do something that I really enjoy doing. And that is I was always interested in aviation, but that kind of, more than anything else, my brothers and sisters and their life experiences kind of taught me that maybe I should pursue something less financially rewarding, but more, fulfilling, which hit the nail square on the head on that one. So,
yeah, that's very neat. So you, a couple of things you talked about recognizing the chaos, even though you were living in it, right? I think maybe a lot of people would have just seen that as, well, this is life. And I don't know if you recognized it as a child, if you recognized it as a parent or, leaving home, but somewhere in there, just seeing this big, busy family life. But partly because of that, you had several older siblings to look up to, to see what your options were in living life and make some really actually informed decisions for probably well ahead of your years at that time. You also noted that you already had that interest in aviation. So when was the first time you were on a plane? Did you travel much as a kid? How did you get there? Or was it just, they were always overhead and you were aware of them? How did that come about?
I always thought aviation was the coolest. I always had toy planes. My favorite plane still is the F4U Corsair, World War II propeller-driven plane, and I had a model of it when I was a kid. It was about this big, and I had that thing for years and years and years and years, and it was just my favorite plane. It still is. And I guess I just never really thought I'd have a chance to go be a fighter pilot, go and join the military and become a pilot, fighter pilot, that type of thing. And so my dad was in the Air Force Reserves, but he was he was a ground pounder. He did not fly or anything.
Yeah.
and was very derogatory towards the military. Just thought it was a waste of his time, and he really just went to go do it to get the GI Bill and get an education. Very discouraged me completely from trying to do it. So I never really gave it a second thought until I came to that realization with my brothers and sisters, and maybe not really being fulfilled, at least not in their early careers. And that was, well, let's give it a shot. But I think it was probably really loving airplanes, really watching every aviation movie, even like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, man, he's a great pilot. And like, look at him, he's a hero, all that stuff, whether it was Top Gun or Star Wars, or, I could list 100 aviation movies, and every single one of them is just like that. That's for me right there. That's what I want to do. And we had an old Commodore 64, an old Atari, Commodore 64. Every aviation game that came out, I played until, endlessly. Even after I finished it, I went back and played it more. And I remember my friend had a Nintendo and I didn't, and there was a Top Gun game on it. And I couldn't play it because we didn't have a Nintendo. And I just remember really being upset, like despondent about that. I was like, we need a Nintendo. Anyway, we never got one. I got to play it over at his house occasionally. But that's probably like the one aviation game I didn't finish as a kid. So.
Wow. So I think I want to move into school, but we can kind of stay in childhood still. What was school like?
It was good. But again, that's where I started to realize that, I was taking a bunch of accounting classes, and finance and statistics, and it's not, that is not a cure for boredom. No, that is not something you do because you're really inspired by it. I think you probably, maybe if you're an accountant, like they love numbers and they love dealing with numbers, but like I did not find any inspiration. It was just something I was getting through. And then I thought about what that meant. Like, I'm just going to get through the next 40 years of my life. And that was it. So, I went through a phase. I did really well in school to start at Cal Poly Pomona. And then I kind of lost my way. About a year and a half in, I think I flunked every class one quarter. Just because I just completely lost interest. What am I even doing here? And then recovered from that. And that's when I kind of started formulating this plan of doing something different, doing something that I would really be interested in. And then I had to work that much harder to finish. I think my last 2-3 quarters, I worked through the summer and took, like 16 credits. And then at one quarter, I was 28 credits to catch up for how much of a dummy I had been during the phase where I had lost my path. And I remember they asked me that. I had an interview to go into the Navy. And it's an officer interview because I was entered as an officer and went to officer candidate school, and they were asking me like, so what about your grades right here? These are good. These are good. What happened right in here? And I was like, well, I got lost interest. I didn't know what I want to do. Completely lost focus, everything. And I'm like, and you see what I do when I can focus, I can do this. And so I think that makes me a better candidate because I know what I want. And anyways, I guess they liked my answer enough that they passed me. So.
Yeah. Well done. Very cool. So tell us about what was next.
So once I decided to do that, literally just, there was a career fair at the college and went and talked to a Navy recruiter, and, he was interested, but also like, I'm sure he gets a lot of like, oh yeah, I want to be a pilot. No, I really want to be a pilot. And he's like, okay, well, if you're interested, then do X, Y, Z. Study for these tests, make an appointment with me. Let's take these tests. Let's see where you fall on the aptitude test. So I guess I, went out and I studied my butt off for, 2-3 months of just like taking these tests over and over and over again. Went and took the tests and had a very high aptitude score. And when I checked back in with him, he's like, okay. Well, let's move to the next step. Fill out all the paperwork, do the interviews, everything else. I kept it a secret from my parents until well after I had signed the paperwork, just because I knew what my dad's reaction would be, and I knew what my mom's reaction would be, that she would be scared for me. So I didn't want to worry her, but I also didn't want to I had made up my mind. So I didn't want to be deterred. So took the test, everything, or the interviews and everything else went very well. Entrance interview, entrance physical, and then had to finish up school and was on a pretty compressed timeline to do that because of the, quarter and a half to, the better part of a year of just screwing around. Making up courses and catching up. And then, so I finished up Cal Poly June. Oh God, I can't tell you. I think I started June 21st, 1999. That sounds right. In the Navy, which I had, if I remember right, less than a week between graduating and then leaving for officer candidate school. And that was a trip, first day at officer candidate school, getting yelled at and head shaved and, get completely thrown into a world that I really knew nothing about at all.
Did you feel supported? You said you kind of kept it, as a secret until you'd made your decision, you'd signed the paperwork. Did you feel supported?
Oh, no. That was,
okay.
No, my folks were not. My mom was always supportive, but my dad was pissed. My dad was not impressed with my decision making, not impressed that I kept it quiet from him, not impressed that I chose military. Was firmly under the impression that I was going to get there and I was going to be, chipping paint and swabbing decks and that kind of stuff. And at one point made a comment, something to the effect of they don't give pilot slots to people like you. They give them to, people who have connections and, senators' sons and that kind of stuff. And, I was very deliberate about what I had done, and it is what it is. He was upset. Honestly, didn't really communicate for, almost probably 6-8 months. I did. I called home and I checked in with mom and dad all the time, but it was a very, they did not come to my OCS graduation. They did not. My dad finally came around by the time I finished flight school, but that was more than 2 years later, and I'd gone home in between and we had sort of reconciled things at that point. And once he saw me going to flight school and succeeding in flight school, I think he kind of started to understand that things were different. But even then it was my mom was always supportive. My dad, not so much, and it's in a way, I think that made me more determined and more certain that I was not going to fail. I was going to get what I wanted, and I was going to prove to everybody, and not the least of which my dad. But I had other people in my life you're crazy. Why are you doing this? Why would you graduate college and then go in the military? What are you, stupid? That was kind of, in Southern California, that's kind of the response, right? It's kind of materialistic, not very much of a military presence outside of San Diego. And so people don't really understand. But that was a common thing that I would hear from people in my college classes as well, is why would you do that? That seems stupid. So anyways, joke's on them.
Well, yeah, I love how you not only proved that when you want to focus on something, you succeed, but you also took it as just a motivation to make sure that you did succeed. So you referenced earlier, tons of movies, tons of video games, model airplanes, but you've mentioned more than once Top Gun, which I'm sure, the vast majority of people listening to us are very familiar with. And I can't imagine you are a minority in being a kid looking at Top Gun, wanting to live that life, right? But you actually did it. So how did you had people saying this isn't the right path. You had people saying maybe not supporting you along the way, but you did do it. So how did you make it happen?
I try to teach my girls this, that I went in, I wouldn't say at a disadvantage. I was never disadvantaged, but a lot of these guys came into the military aviation program with either a ton of military experience or a ton of flying experience or both. And I came in with, I think I had 10 or 12 hours of flight time in a Cessna that I begged, borrowed, and stole to pay for.
Yeah.
And just enough to like, yeah, this is for me. Like this is amazing. Flying around a Cessna 152, which is like, you know, the Volkswagen Bug of airplanes. And I'm like, well, this is badass. So, but my game plan was I may not be as smart as these people. I may not have as much experience, but I can work harder than anybody. And I would say that's one thing I really took from both my mom and my dad. They, when it comes to work ethic and like setting a goal and just never giving up, that was it. And I mean, so it was interesting to see because a lot of the guys and girls from the academy got out of the academy that had been in a very rigid environment for 4 years and not a an environment where you can cut loose and enjoy yourself necessarily.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I had this full college experience. And so when it came to flight school, it's like, I will be 100% focused until I get through this and I get what I want, which is I want jets, I want fighters, I want to land on carriers. And I did. And I mean, I knew everything that was coming up. I knew it forwards and backwards and could recite it to you, you know, in pig Latin, for God's sakes. Like that's it. And, you know, I held that mentality through flight school. I was willing to outwork other people.
Yeah.
So one thing, growing up as a kid, my parents owned video game arcades. I forgot to mention this part.
Fun.
So we owned tons of video game arcades. So I'm certain like the hand-eye coordination of playing video games as a kid.
Yes.
I remember playing new games and like people on the arcade would like gather around me like, oh my God, watch this kid. And, you know, I'd be like 8 years old, like solving the game that nobody else could solve.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was like some hand-eye coordination stuff too, that I had this unfair advantage. So I'm not like Mr. Disadvantaged, but I didn't have the skills that everybody else did. I had a completely different set of skills and a work ethic that was going to get me there with the skills that I had.
So I just want to ask this, talking about your childhood and saying that you never had that Nintendo. Why do you think Nintendo was kept out of your house when you had a variety of other types of video games available to you?
Well, that's it. I wanted to play all the aviation games, not just ones I had access to. I wanted all of them. But there was like a Star Wars one that was, you know, and you're flying around like an X-Wing and shooting stuff, and you're down in the trench of the Death Star. And I could solve that thing like 10 times over. And that's like one of the ones where people were watching like, oh my God, this kid's incredible. I'm like 8 years old and just crushing it. But yeah, I mean, every aviation game, if it was there, I wanted it and I wanted to play it. And I didn't have that one. I remember being very upset.
Yeah. I'm surprised. It feels like there was a lot of support for video games around you. I'm surprised that nobody ever caved and let it in your house.
I mean, God knows I tried. But
yeah.
They're like, we have plenty of video games. We're not buying more.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's logical. I
think it was actually my parents at that point kind of realized that, you know, when Nintendos came out and the home entertainment systems, they're like, this is kind of the end of the video game arcade. And so I think they really bought into like Atari and Commodore 64. By the time Nintendo came out, I think they saw the writing on the wall and they sold the business. Yeah. Shortly after that, they sold the business and made a ton of money, and we sold the arcades and it was over with. So.
Okay. So I think we were back into flight school. You were saying, you know, I had sort of asked you, like, how did you make it happen with, you know, not like, it's not a complete underdog story. You had a lot going for you, but other people had more hours, more years, maybe more connections, just advantages that might have gotten them ahead. You said you were willing to work harder than anybody else, and when you put that focus to it, you know, you were really able to accomplish what you wanted to. And you also mentioned that it's something that you tell your girls. So you have 4 girls. I don't want to jump too far off. I do want to come back to career, but just tell us a little bit about fatherhood. When did you become a father? What is fatherhood meant for your life and your outlook?
It'll come in later when we talk about the crash, but that was prior to that. You know, my wife and I, we had been married for, at that point, 5 years, and had been dating for, you know, another couple of years prior to that. And, you know, we were satisfied. We didn't want to have kids. We were not interested in it at all. And that was kind of the spark that you start going through the accident and the fallout and like a lot of the like mental soul searching type stuff. Like what what does this mean? Why am I here? Like,
Got
all
it.
the stuff, all that. I'm sure that everybody kind of goes through this after a traumatic experience. But,
Yeah.
and that was the point where I think I want to be a dad. I think I really want to be, I think I'd be a really good dad. And I was
Yeah.
always kind of nervous about becoming a dad because, I wanted to be the supportive dad, and try to improve on the role model my dad had set for me. We'll just
Yeah.
leave it at that. But anyway, so it wasn't until we were about to move from Fallon, Nevada, we started trying to have kids. And, I mean, it was not not to tell too many tales of us. We started trying, and like it was like instantaneous. It was like,
Oh.
I was like, oh, I thought there was going to be this really fun period where we were going to be trying a lot, and it was like the first month. It's like, oh, well, okay. So,
Oh, that's funny.
It was pretty funny. So I was really looking forward to the trying part. Anyway, so we had our first daughter, Lydia, and that was just the most amazing experience. It's just absolutely incredible, right? And then like, let's have another one. And my wife only ever wanted to have one or maybe two. Then we had Ruby, and Lydia was tough, but she was such a sweetheart. And then Ruby came, and she was just the most adorable little kid and just so easy going and such a sweetheart the entire time. We're like, well, maybe we should have a third. And then we had a third, and it's like, oh God, what have we done? She was just hell on wheels the entire time. I remember her being 8 months old and scowling at me, like, like, oh my God, what have we done? And number 4, so that was Gaia. Number 4, Octavia, she came along after I had retired from the military. And it's a joke around our house that, so Gaia and Octavia are both born in January 24th and January 25th.
Wow.
2 years apart. And Octavia was not planned. But like, what is going on 9 months prior to? Oh, that's Jazz Fest. Got it. We're out at Jazz Fest all day, listening to music, having a good time, having a few drinks, coming back, and I guess we made a baby. So,
that's funny.
But like it's incredible. But I do think, in a way, I'm not going to claim I'm a good dad. I try my best, but it's day by day. Like yesterday was one of the harder days as a dad. It's just like after like 3 hours of just getting pummeled by daddy, you're exhausted, and you're like, good God, just shut up. On days like that, it's tough, but I think overall I'm a good dad. And I think when the girls have stuff happen, they probably get tired of my anecdotes, but I can relate it back. I dealt with this. This is what I've seen. I knew somebody who dealt with this, and like all this, like a well of experience from being in the military and being around all kinds of people from all different walks of life, all kinds of different life experiences. And, in my house, I try to make the answer like, we're honest and we work hard and we do our best. And that's all you can do. Right. And, try to teach the girls that kind of stuff. And so I feel like we do a good job. I think the neighbors are a little shocked sometimes. We'll be out doing the yard work. We do our own yard work, and which is not normal around here. But then they're out there and they're working and they're helping and they're doing stuff. And like, I feel like we're a team. I feel like the family's a team, and it makes me happy. All of them have their such unique personalities, and like, you have to like speak to them, and like, you have to get to them in a different way. Like Lydia, I know if I say, I need to approach her like this, and Ruby, like I can just ask her to do something, and she'll be like, yes, Father, I love you. I will do anything for you. Yes. And Gaia, it's like, you got to like flick the switches in the right order to get her, and then she'll be like, fine, I will help. And then Octavia, we haven't figured that one out yet, but.
So how old are the kids, just for reference?
11. Lydia's 11. Ruby is 9. Gaia is 6 going on 7 next month, and Octavia is 4 going on 5. So
Okay. Wasn't a test, but you did really well
no, no,
anyway.
no.
I know
That's
sometimes it's like, did they?
well, it's easy
So
because at one point they were all 2, 4, 6, 8. There's just
yeah,
a little bigger gap between Ruby and Gaia, so they lag about 6 months. So occasionally it's 3 years between those two, but it makes it very easy.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's no better advice you can give than you just gave, and that you give continually with your girls. And, I'm sure at different points in their stages in their lives, that wealth of experience and those examples and those stories that you have to bring are going to be invaluable. I know there are moments where they're going to say, "Yeah, Dad, I don't care," but
I'm sure there'll be a few.
there will be a few of those, but there will be so many where that's what they're looking for, where that's what they need, and they know that you'll have the answers and you'll have the experiences to share.
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy, or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit audiolife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
In what you've shared so far, you do bring that outlook of analyzing and learning from, all of your siblings around you, from your parents, and it sounds like from so many people that you've experienced through work as well. I think that's something that you bring uniquely. It's not just the years that you've lived, it's the way that you see and learn from all of those people around you.
I'm able to bring in a lot of examples from growing up as a kid and like, hey, here's what happens. Let me give you the example of my brother Richard, who didn't want to study and didn't want to go to school. And my sister Angela, who was a perfect student, this and that. Like, things go hard for this one. Things go easy for this one. Like, we're never going to stop giving you a hard time about getting schoolwork done. You can either do it yourself or we'll remind you every minute to make sure you get it done. So, but it's like stuff like that where it's like, I do think that, the work ethic and the importance of education and working hard that my parents instilled was the most valuable gift they could have ever given me. And that's what I'd like to give to my girls as well. Like, you can accomplish anything if you have a goal and you work towards it and you don't give up. I do still think to this day you can accomplish anything.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So I agree. So I jumped ahead a little partly because I wanted to know your family stage as we talk about some of those really big moments in your career. But we will come back to family some more, but let's go back to your career. You had actually taken us from I think you had ballparked probably something like 10 to 12 hours in a Cessna to being in flight school. Tell us about, I don't know if there was anything significant, and I'm sure there were lots of things, but if there's anything in flight school that you want to highlight before we sort of talk about what was next from there.
Oh man, it was just, it just felt amazing. I loved it. I went through with a great group of guys. I'm sure every group is great. I always seem to get along a little bit better with the Marines. At one point I thought about jumping over to the Marines because they were just all, I got along with, I was on the same wavelength as them. Here's a funny one for you. My on-wing, when I was in T-34s, which is your initial primary trainer that you're in. So the way it works is you show up, you go to Officer Candidate School, that's 13 weeks, and then you go to Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination, that's 6 weeks. And then after that, you go to Primary Flight School, and that can last, 6 to 10 months. Starting in T-34s, all of it, I just thought was amazing. Like, I was just, learning about aerodynamics and how airplanes really work. Then getting to primary and getting to do aerobatics for the first time, doing loops and rolls, and that was just the coolest thing ever. Flying formation, flying this close to a plane next to you just blew my mind. So freaking cool. And I loved Corpus Christi. It was in Corpus Christi, Texas, where I later met my wife. Just everything. I couldn't get enough of it. I would routinely go ride in the back of flights as a student, where there'd be an instructor up front and I could just ride in the back and go along because I really enjoyed it. I just I couldn't get enough of it. And I mean, in a way I still can't, it's just fun. So in terms of going through and things that really stand out, I'll toot my own horn for a minute. I worked my butt off And in primary, I got, there's like a grading scale and it's all based on standard deviations and stuff. And I got like the top possible grade out of primary flight school, an NSS Navy standard score. And I got an 80, which means I'm like, the bell curves over here. Like, and I mean, I think that was all my arcade experiences, but then also just working my tail off. Everybody else was out partying and chasing girls or, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm in there studying my emergency procedures and studying course rules and studying engine and oil diagrams. And like, I knew everything about that plane inside and out. And then I got selected for jets. I graduated top of my class. I got selected for jets. It was a huge motivating moment for me. And then I got down to Kingsville, Texas, and started learning about the T-45. And like, that was just the coolest, and worked my butt off there. I still scored way above average, didn't score as well. It was certainly harder. But I suppose that's kind of like going from like college football to the pros, right? But man, it was challenging. It was hard. This is the first time I landed aboard an aircraft carrier, and that just blew my mind again. First time fighting an airplane, doing air combat and dogfighting, and that blew my mind. Air-to-air gunnery and that type of stuff, like simulating shooting at another airplane, like, and trying to like refine your techniques for doing that. All these things, just like, was there one thing that stood out? I don't think so. Probably landed on the carrier the first time, and then, that being said, it was also the first time I knew somebody who was killed. There was a Air Force pilot who was riding the back seat of a T-45. They had gone out to the carrier. They went overhead the carrier and they rolled into a turn, and the accident investigation found that the stick got stuck under the back pilot's leg strap. And they just kept rolling it into the ocean. And like, that stuff happens and you're like, I'm bulletproof. It's not going to happen to me. It's a stupid 20-year-old kid type of thing. Like, I'm bulletproof. Nothing will ever happen to me. And like, then you just get older and smarter. So I suppose that was a turning point too. I had a buddy punch out. I'd been to his wedding. He punched out. He came back. He blew a tire on the carrier and came back, lost control of the jet on the ground, punched out. He was fine, but didn't fly anymore. A lot of people failed out of advanced flight training down there in Kingsville. So kind of like seeing that, but again, all of it was just so overwhelming all the time. Yeah. I loved it. And so I loved it so much, I asked, upon graduation from flight school, to stay as what's called a SIRGRAD, a selectively retained graduate. They basically keep you as a new student, as a new graduate, to teach the new students the basics. And so basically, like, first tour instructor, which was a big honor, and I was like, hey, I'm the top of my class. I was the top of my last class. I'm your dude. I want to stick around. I want to instruct. And so they did. And that was cool. In a lot of ways, I think I sort of regressed as an instructor, because it was more about like, these people are right behind me and I want to try to hook them up and give them all good grades and be a friendly guy. And kind of lost some of the military bearing I think I had. But, overall, very positive experience. But then when I had to go back to being a student again, it was a little bit of like, I lost a little bit of the focus that I had prior to that. But at that point, 3.5 years in to the Navy, and like, just ready to get out of the training environment, like go to the fleet, go do what I'm supposed to be doing. So
yeah, so the more you talk, the more it's like you really did live a version of Top Gun.
It really, what's funny is I took the two oldest to go see the new Top Gun movie. And as we go through all this, it's really kind of a trip, because Lydia knows all the stories, Ruby knows most of the stories. But as we were watching the movie, Lydia looked over at me, and I still remember it. She's like, Daddy, is this movie about you? It was just the sweetest thing ever. Cool. I mean, I was like, oh my God. I still get a little choked up about it. I'm like, that is so sweet. But
that's very cool.
Yeah, it was really pretty neat to see. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels there. There's, a lot of people have that sort of stuff. Certainly the movie is not about me.
All right. We'll leave that. We'll leave that there. I mean, at the very least, if the movie wasn't inspired by you, you were inspired by the movie. We know that much.
Absolutely.
All right. So, I'm curious because as you go through the experience, like you talked about how focused you were, how some of the other, you did talk about how you had just the best like crew around you, the best cohort around you, but also how at earlier points they were maybe more distracted with, being out on their own and wanting to party and whatever else they were doing, and you weren't. And then later on, you talk about how you were really focused. I'm deducing, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm making an assumption that, everybody's getting more focused by that point. What are some of the like funny moments? What were some of the things? Like, did you have time to sort of, unfocus a little bit here and there?
Oh,
and
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just constant nonsense, I mean,
like what?
I remember laughing so hard here at officer candidate school about just the dumbest things, but it's like you're in this like pressure environment
Yeah.
where everything's supposed to be so serious all the time. And then, somebody cuts loose or somebody does something funny or like, farts at the wrong time or something. And it's the funniest thing you've ever seen in your entire life. It's like, or the drill instructors, once you realize that the drill instructors are not really trying to make you fail, they're just trying to see if they can get under your skin. Right. And you understand it's a game and now it's funny and you can look at the stuff they're doing and it's just hilarious. I mean, so like, I can't give you a good example. I remember there were a few during inspections where like, it's pure chaos. There's like, they've got this guy over here doing jumping jacks while singing supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And, this guy over here is like, tearing stuff apart. It's just like, just so absurd. Or like during flight school, such good dudes. Like it seems like the Marines kind of went this way, and then like all the academy types went over this way. These are all the very brainy, like intellectual type, like 1,000-pound brains. And all the Marines are kind of like, I kind of fit in with them. We were all the crayon eaters, and like, but they were all such good people, but like just hilarious. Everything that would come out of their mouth would be funny. And I just remember laughing at more at that point than I ever did in my entire life, and there were certainly times to cut loose, but like when it was time to study, those dudes by and large, because they didn't have the 20-pound brains, like we all like had to study that much more. And like, but it just became a very tight knit group. So, I mean, in terms of like funny stories, I mean, there's so many, and they probably wouldn't translate because you're like, that's cool. That's it's like that, you're all kind of trauma bonded,
Yeah.
I remember, this isn't a funny story, but it's just the funny stuff that happens that later becomes funny. One of the guys, fresh out of officer candidate school and, making, not very much money, he went out and bought a brand new Jeep Wrangler, and he was driving on the beaches in Corpus Christi and smashed into the submerged piece of metal. It was like a part of a ship or something. Completely destroyed his brand new Jeep. And I remember him just kind of like sitting there looking at it as his like brand new Jeep is just absolutely destroyed, sitting there, and we all started laughing. Like, everybody's okay, nobody's hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe that just happened. That's the most absurd thing ever. Like, just stuff like that where it's just with the pressure cooker and you get to go like cut loose and like everybody's so worried about whether or not he was okay, and then you find out he's okay and it's a truck. Who cares? Like, we'll get over it. That's why God invented insurance, right? And it just becomes this funny thing. Like, I talk about, well, we had a big bonfire and everybody was fine, and you drank a few beers and like all was forgotten. And like, I think he got a new Jeep. I don't remember.
Well,
but all that kind of stuff, like, just, you just make fun of everything all the time. And if you couldn't laugh at yourself, you didn't deserve to be there. Everybody was making fun of everyone for everything, and that's what made it funny. So
got it. Yeah, no, it gives a really good picture of what in its own way, even though it's the extremes, it's its own balance, right? You were so far into that, like that deep, dedicated, focused, pent up side of things that it had to swing the other way sometimes. It had to just be silly, goofy, or give you enough perspective to be like, for some people at some points in time, that brand new Jeep is everything to them. But we have enough perspective to realize he's safe, not a big deal. It's just a car.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's move forward. So after graduation, what was next? So you talked about how badly you just want, like you enjoyed flight school, but how badly you just wanted to, you know, to be through it, to have your job, to be
Yeah, to get
in
through that.
charge. I don't know if you didn't say in charge, but maybe to be in charge.
Oh, I wasn't in charge of much except for myself for a while.
Okay.
But after flight school, I stuck around for that surgrad job, did that for about 15, 16 months. That's when I met my wife. She
Okay.
was going to A&M Corpus Christi at the time. And so we started dating. Then I got orders to Virginia Beach and went to Virginia Beach to go start flying the Hornet. And that was just everything I had done until then. The first time, I immediately started going and getting the backseat rides in the Hornet and like went and watched like how a plane could maneuver and what it could do.
Mm,
And it was just eye-opening. It was just, holy smokes. I'm in the big league now.
yeah.
And went and did that. Kingsville in 2002, end of 2002, spent about a year at we call it the Fleet Replacement Squadron, or the RAG, which is an old nomenclature for replacement air group. And they teach you everything about the F-18, how to fly it, how to navigate it, how to fight, how to drop bombs, how to land aboard a carrier day and night. So that was my first night landings. That was probably somewhere around 2003, November 2003, October, November 2003. And just like landing on the carrier during the day eventually becomes routine.
Okay.
And is not scary. Landing on the carrier at night never becomes not scary,
Yeah.
So, and I'll give you an example of like when you land on the carrier, the hook grabs and the plane rolls out, and you go to full power. In case you miss the wire, you go and you fly away,
Okay.
right? But when you stop, they tell you to hold your brakes, and then they pull the wire back, and the plane comes back. And then once they tell you to bring your hook up. And then as they tighten everything up, pull that wire back into battery is what it's called. You're supposed to hold the brakes with your feet. Now your feet, it's a calf exercise. So you push the top of your feet. And I can tell you that, I don't know, 120 whatever night carrier landings I had, there was never a time at this point where my feet were not trembling. I mean, after a 7-hour mission in Iraq, the scariest part was landing aboard the carrier. And my feet never not shook.
Yeah.
So my very last night carrier landing, I knew it was going to be my last one because it was going to go be an adversary, and they don't land aboard the carrier. And I was so thankful. But they take you through all that stuff, but that was the most intimidating for me was the night carrier landings. I think it is for everybody, but dropping bombs from a real fighter, really fighting the airplane and just enjoying the hell out of it. And I had a knack for it, really enjoyed it. All of it was incredible. And Virginia Beach was a fun town, another fun group, made lifelong friends from that squadron that, I still keep in contact with, and just incredible. And then from there, finished out that training, and I got my first fleet squadron, which was VFA 15, the Valiants, carrier air wing 8 aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And so that was my air wing and my ship that I was going to deploy with. And they had just come back from a combat deployment. So I went to, I guess that would have been November or December of 2004. I got to VFA 15 and then spent 3 years with them. Did a combat deployment with them, workups deployment, second set of workups, all that stuff. So, yeah.
So I don't know if you've touched on some of this yet or not. You may have, but I want to sort of, as we survey points in your career, talk about highlights and challenges. Can you walk us through wherever you want to start, highlights or challenges in your career?
In terms of the flying, my real challenge was instruments. The only flight I ever tanked was my instrument check ride, my IR check ride. Roddy McDowell was my instructor. It would have been 2000, I can still remember. And I just was not good at instruments. And it's a very conceptual thing, completely different than flying when you're using your eyes and fighting and everything else. Coincidentally, this is what I do at Southwest now. So I've gotten very good at it. It did not come naturally to me.
I was going to ask, but later it occurred to me that might be the case.
This is the flying that I do, but it's all, at the time it was all radial intercepts off of radio beacons and, flying. Yeah. And so, kind of trying to think through all the procedures, and it's all, I can still remember some of the nomenclature. You're going to tune, twist, toggle, all these things. I'm like step.
Yeah.
And I thought I had it right, but I didn't have it good enough. Anyways, so tanked that, got a couple practices, flew it again, did it fine. I was never particularly strong in instruments. That came back when I got to Southwest. Like, I had to work that much harder to actually to get good at it. And now I can, it's funny, I go back as a contractor now and I fly the same plane in the F5. It's much upgraded, but it's like, it's a non-starter. I used to get nervous about like going to a foreign airfield that I had never landed at before. And what if this, what if that? I'm not sure the runway configuration. Now it's like, that's what I do. And it's a total non-starter. And so I'm like leading the dudes at TAC Air across country because I'm like, oh, this is no sweat. I've got to just hang out on my wing. I'll get you there. Like, oh, let me show you how to shoot this kind of approach. Let me show you how to do this. Let me show you how to do that. And I'm teaching them. They have way more hours in the jet than I do, but I'm teaching them how to use systems they've never touched before. The other real challenge was, just sort of the interpersonal stuff in the, not necessarily in flight school, but I don't know what it was. I always seemed to like have a level of friction with like specifically pilots from the academy. And I think this is a fairly common thing where just a different thought process, a different way of thinking about things, a different way of going about things, and just always had friction there. So learning how to deal with personalities like that, and the 20, I can give you an example of a guy in my first fleet squadron, Bob McClure. We used to call him Waldo. Smartest guy I've ever met. I don't doubt that is true. Maybe not the smartest, definitely top 3.
Okay.
The dude could build you an airplane out of like household parts, right? And incredibly smart. He was an aeronautical engineer, physicist or some shit. I don't know. But he couldn't make you toast. Like, one of those. And it was like, meanwhile, I'm exactly the opposite. I'm like, I can do all these things very competently, but I don't understand this stuff. And I used to call it the I believe button. Like, when you start getting to like complex, like engineering and like, physics and everything else. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to press this I believe button right here and just learn the facts. How it's supposed to work. I don't understand, but this is okay. Yeah, that works like that. And like, meanwhile, his brain's all the way over here, and he's like thinking about all these things, and he's calculating out torque ratios in his head on the catapult, on the carrier. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So like, speaking to those people can be challenging. And I found that was every single time I had a personality conflict with somebody, it was always because they were the 20-pound brain that like didn't necessarily understand how my brain works, which is like a lot of estimation, a lot of guesswork, a lot of like on the fly like type of thinking. And they're like, no, you have to be able to calculate the torque in your head. That's 281,000 pounds of foot-pounds of pressure on the left wing. And I'm like, I don't know, it's about like this much stick. If I just about that much. They're like, well, how do you know? I'm like, it's like, if that feels right, So those were the hardest parts for me. It was, I would say dealing with the engineer types. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And highlights. Let's spend a minute on highlights before we.
Highlights. Finish up my combat deployment aboard the TR. I flew my brains out. I flew more than any other pilot in the air wing. So there's probably 80, 90 pilots. I had 49 missions. I had something like 600 or 800 hours on that deployment, which is an absurd amount of hours. And most of it was 6 hours at a time flying over the beach and flying over Iraq. So, it'd be an hour transit up overhead Baghdad. It'd be an hour transit back, a night carrier landing typically. And, you'd hit the tanker at least twice, sometimes 3 times. So I got 49 of those in one. I skipped 2 port visits because I'm like, this is what I'm here to do. This is why I've done all this, is to like help these guys on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I skipped those 2 port visits to go into Iraq. We deployed out of Iraq and we're flying out of an airbase in Iraq, while the carrier was ostensibly, they pulled into port and everybody was screwing around. I'm like, I'm here to work, man.
Yeah.
And went and flew another 10 or 12 missions on each of those, 7-day stretches or 5-day stretches, whatever they were.
Wow.
So I consider that to be, from my fleet squadron, the very best thing that I did. I outflew everybody, and I kicked ass. I feel pretty good about saying that. All kinds of stuff there. I mean, I've got a story, helping troops on the ground multiple times, like finding weapons caches. There's one story, I guess it's probably a good time to tell it. It was northwest of Baghdad, and it was when Ramadi and Fallujah were going down, and really bad situation where, it was just constant fighting every day. And, guys constantly, troops in contact was kind of like that. Your blood pressure would go up when you'd hear that, because you're like, okay, it's game time. Guys on the ground are being shot at. They need air support. They called us in. We were orbiting overhead Baghdad, and they sent us about 5 kill boxes away. And like, there are troops in contact. They need you here right now. So we hustle over as fast as we can, use up a lot of gas in the meantime. So I send my wingman up to go get gas so that there's always somebody on station. And in the meantime, talking to a controller on the ground, he's like, hey, what had happened was there's a river, and there was basically like a cave complex, or like a storage facility built into the bank of the river here. And the troops, the Marines there, had determined that there was a weapons cache in there. So they had gone to raid it, but it was an ambush. And so from across the river, they were being shot at and shelled, and from across, I believe it was the Euphrates, it might have been the Tigris, I don't remember. But we're completely pinned down and couldn't do anything. You've got to stop these guys. They're across. We can't target them. We can't even poke our heads out. We're screwed. Like, they're going to kill us. And I've got my targeting sensors in there. And these guys have taken positions just outside this little village. And there's like palm groves and everything else that I couldn't see where they were shooting from. So, you're faced with this ethical dilemma. What do? Do you drop a bomb, but it's right next to a village, but you got to stop them from shooting? Or what do you do? And I didn't, ethical dilemma is, I said, well, I can make them stop shooting. I can give you about 30 seconds. He's like, that's all we need. Okay. I can make him stop shooting. And if I was 5 feet above the palm trees, I would be surprised because I came by supersonic at the top of the palm trees.
Jeez.
And just blew the lid off the place. If you've never heard a fighter jet go by supersonic, but it sounds like an explosion. It would sound like a bomb had just gone off next to you, and probably ripped all the fronds off the palm trees.
Yeah.
And I could hear the guy key the mic as my sonic boom went by, and all the guys start cheering, and I could hear them laughing and crying, and they're all booking out the door. And they got out, and he's like, that did it. He's like, come back again. 9G turn all the way back around.
Jeez.
And it is so the, 1 second. Like 9G turn back around, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to come from the same direction yet, because now they see where you went. They're going to be looking for you, whether they have surface air rockets or guns or whatever. 9G turn, and I come from the other direction now and blow the windows off them again. And the guy's on the radio and he's talking to me, and I remember it was the very best thing I did in Iraq.
Yeah.
I saved those dudes.
It's incredible.
And it was, man. And he's telling me on the radio, he's like, you have no idea. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm like, I'm things out, ready to go. I'm looking for these, pardon my French, I'm looking for these motherfuckers who are trying to kill my buddies, because I want to go get them. And I couldn't find them. So I'm apologizing on the radio to the student. I'm like, I can't find them. I'm looking for him. I can't find him. He's like, who fucking cares? You did it. I'm like, no, I want to do more. Like, I got to go get him. And he's like, we're out of here, man. It's cool. Thanks. You know, I mean, it was much more formal, right? But like, that's in the parlance that everybody else would understand. But it was, man, that was a good day.
Yeah.
So then my buddy came off the tanker and, you know, he's listening to this whole thing and he's like, holy shit, man, that's amazing. And but like the standard thing to do, so I came back. Here's the end of the story is I came back. We were not supposed to go that low. We were not supposed to do below 10,000 feet without permission. We weren't supposed to do this. We weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
The right answer was I was supposed to have dropped the bomb, right? But what's the unintended consequences of that, right?
Yeah.
So I came back. I was like, oh yeah, nothing much happened. And I destroyed my tapes because I didn't want to get in trouble for breaking all the rules. Anyways, I really wish I had that video of me flying over because I'll bet you we have what's called a radar altimeter and it bottoms out at 10 feet. And I would be surprised if it was reading anything other than 10 feet for a really long time. It's the lowest and the fastest I've ever gone in my entire life. And anyways, I destroyed the tapes, didn't really tell anybody about it. And like, that was it.
Until now. No. You've been listening to the AudioLife podcast, where we tell your story in your voice. I've been your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today you got to hear the memoir of Tony Roy. I hope you enjoyed.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.